It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I'm excited to be with you today. I've got a great episode for you, and I have two fabulous women here in my company at the Fayetteville Public Library in the Center for Innovation, and I'm excited to talk with them about the organization that they represent here in Northwest Arkansas called NextUp. And my guests today are Lela Davidson, who is with Saatchi X, and Kimberly McGee, who is with Walmart. They are the co-chairs of NextUp. And NextUp is an organization that helps to advance women, all women, growing businesses and transforming the workplace through the power of community. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Lela Davidson and Kimberly McGee to the podcast. How are you guys doing?
Amazing. How are you?
I'm great. It's
awesome.
Good to be here. Thank you for coming on a rainy day and, deciding to spend some time with us. So why don't we start with you, Lela, and kind of just share your origin story and from the time you got here to Northwest Arkansas to being a part of this NextUp organization.
Of course. Well, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to share about the organization. I have been here, I think it's 19 years or going on 20, and relocated when my kids were really small, and like many other families in the area, just found that this is an incredible place to be. Love the pace, the quality of life. And, my kids were little, so they grew up here. And at one point, I think it was about 8 years ago, we said, well, I guess we're staying. We're staying for the long haul. And so, my husband and I are both here. We're empty nested and enjoying the quality of life and just trying to make the most of it and give back. And NextUp is one of the ways that I do that. It's really tightly integrated into my professional life. And it's a personal cause that I just feel incredibly strongly about, and being a resource for women and also just meeting great women and spending time with great women like Kimberly and the rest of our leadership team and all of our volunteers.
Yeah. Now, did you guys both meet through NextUp?
No, we did not.
We actually met through another women's organization, the Junior League of Northwest Arkansas.
Right. That's right. You guys are part of the Junior League. So, okay. That's a very active
Kimberly is actually, probably one of the first friends I've had in Northwest Arkansas. And I think that's to the power of these organizations. They attract great women that stick together and end up doing more things together in the future.
Well, yeah. And, that's a constant theme that has been woven through many of our episodes when we talk to people about how they met, different individuals. And a lot of it is related around organizations and different missions that are happening here in Northwest Arkansas. And that's how people get to connect. And really, I have connected with so many people through this podcast, and it's become easier and easier to build relationships, to make new friends, and to find out about things that matter to other people that I can then attach myself to it. So I have found Northwest Arkansas to be a very open space for that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Kimberly, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you for hosting us.
Absolutely.
So I'm Kimberly McGee. I have been in Northwest Arkansas approximately 20 years. I actually came to Northwest Arkansas for a job in order to join Walmart. And I am passionate about just community service and empowering women, which is kind of how I started getting engaged with various organizations in the community. Obviously, with NextUp Northwest Arkansas, I've been a part of the organization now over 10 years, and just had a great opportunity to meet a number of women and continue to serve on the leadership team.
Yeah. And, it's funny you say that, because I know that we don't really know each other, but our paths have crossed through different programs, and we have mutual friends. And that's one of the beautiful things about Northwest Arkansas, is that you're only 1 degree or 2 degrees removed from somebody else in the area, right? And so that's something special about this place. So who would like to kind of share a little bit about NextUp? You guys have a local presence here in Northwest Arkansas, but it is a national organization. So I'd love for somebody just to give a little bit of the background and history of NextUp.
Sure. So we are a national organization. I believe we have about 15 chapters around the country. You can fact check me on that one.
That's fine.
But our chapter is a little over 20 years old here in Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
We last year made a pivot. So our name may be a little bit new for some folks. We were formerly the Network of Executive Women.
Okay.
And so that is the brand that's been around for, over 2 decades and had pretty good equity. There was about a year-long process that we went through at the national level to rebrand and just really refresh the brand and create a more inclusive feeling to it. Network of Executive Women can feel the executive piece could feel exclusive where we want to be inclusive.
Right.
The women in the title, although our mission remains the same, advancing all women in business, we want to welcome our male allies because we need them to create equity in the space. So went through a pretty significant rebrand, which also happened, coming right out of the pandemic. And so it's a pretty exciting time to be part of the organization. We are an educational organization. We do a lot of programming to help women learn how to navigate their space better and negotiate salary, have difficult conversations, just elevate in any of those areas where historically women have needed additional skill building or needed support to level the playing field.
Yeah.
And then, of course, networking is still a huge part. It's a huge core of what we do. And here in our region, we have an incredibly strong region. As you can imagine, all of the sponsors that we have, all of the incredible brands that we have here in the area, as well as Walmart is an amazing. They are a national sponsor as well as a local sponsor. These sponsors really allow us to create really robust programming and as well create those networking opportunities between people who through the course of their day-to-day jobs are maybe never going to cross paths. And yet, just as you mentioned, we might be just 1 degree of separation, but this work that we do together gives us a really good opportunity to connect in a deeper way than maybe we would otherwise have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'll add just something as we think about the name change to NextUp. There were 3 areas of focus that was kind of a part of the strategy for NextUp, and it was really around male allyship, which Lela just mentioned, but also wanting to make sure that we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we advance women of color. So definitely a focus there. And then also thinking about our younger generation and just kind of truly having a talent pipeline when we think about the organization. So it's going to really focus on those 3 areas. And I think the name change kind of encompasses that.
Yeah.
I know that NextUp will always say same mission, new name, elevated brand. So Super excited to share more information with you.
I love that. When I think about, I think of somebody saying next up, who's next, right? We've got next, right? So it's just that whole idea that especially there's a lot of young women that are matriculating through high school and college that need to know that there is a place where they can come to be, not only be affirmed, but to be acknowledged and to be kind of, educated about how to do things and, also to strengthen their voice, which they all have, right? I know that's always a challenge in certain circles. And so I would imagine that all of the major companies here in Northwest Arkansas are inclusive of your membership, or are there some gaps there?
I would say that we try to be intentional about getting good representation of organizations, not only CPG, obviously we're in Northwest Arkansas with major retailers and the vendor community, but also thinking about small businesses, women-owned businesses. So just trying to keep our member representation of all.
Yeah, I think that's important. I was sharing with you guys before we started recording about another program called Dovetail, which we've had on this show with Alex Howland. And, her whole focus is just creating awareness for women and creating more so an opportunity for women to just come together and not be siloed as much as far as that's concerned, if that is such a thing. And I know my wife had a chance to participate in that event, and I can imagine that your events are very similar when you can go to an event and see people that are like you, that, had some of the same shared experiences as you have. It can be helpful as you continue to grow and develop in your career and in life in general. So I think it's important. I always need to see people that not only look like me, but have had some of the same shared experiences as I've had, because it helps validate the path that I'm on. So, and I don't know if you guys have anything to share with that, or some of your experiences around that when it comes to kind of walking alongside some of the young women that you've had the opportunity and the good fortune to encounter through this NextUp program?
No, I would agree with you. I think that even for me, it was one of the main reasons why I joined. I wanted to have a sense of community beyond just kind of my main employer in order to engage with other like-minded women around leadership, but then also just kind of networking and just kind of making more friends in the community. And so just kind of a good opportunity for that as well.
Yeah. Lela,
yeah, I mean, you talk about the shared experience. I think one of the things that I've really taken away from the actual programming content that we offer is, some of the stats and some of the realities around what it takes to get ahead as a woman, living in the society that we live in, or what it might take to get ahead as a woman of color. It is different. Yeah. And so we need to have that space where we're learning the strategies. For example, salary negotiation looks different to be successful as a woman and how you are perceived in that conversation than it looks for a man.
Yeah.
And so there's some very specific things that I think I just really appreciate the programming that we have and the way that we've been able to share that information. And Kimberly is not taking this advantage to segue into the incredible program that she launched last year. Speaking of young women
Are you holding
in
out?
The community.
I'm not holding out.
So Kimberly's team last year, she led the team that launched, was the year before last, actually.
It's been 2 years.
Yeah, our mentor
years.
circles. So
oh, wow.
Why don't you share a little bit about that, Kimberly?
So mentor circles.
Yes.
Was that new to this area or was that something brand new for NextUp?
Well, for the Northwest Arkansas region, it was something that was new. We wanted to, when you think about mentoring and sponsorship, we wanted to create these mentoring circles in order to build a network beyond just, and we have a variety of companies that actively engage with it. Kind of when you talked about what types of organizations are part of NextUp, we were very intentional to make sure that we had representation from all large companies as well as small companies as well. And to really give some of our leaders that are more senior to serve as mentors to some of the other women within the organization. So approximately 10 to 15 women, each one of the mentoring circles, really talking about relevant topics for women. And as we think about advancing careers, but then also when you think about the pandemic being relevant around how the workplace was shifting as well. So just a great opportunity for women to come together and create that sense of community.
Yeah. And what are some out of those conversations that are happening in those circles? What are some of the things that are surfacing the most? Some of the topics that you guys are dealing with the most in those mentoring circles?
Well, I'll touch on a couple of topics. We always talk about creating psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
That's something that's extremely important for women as we think about career advancement, but then also just kind of navigating as a mother, as a wife, wearing multiple hats, because a number of us, we not only volunteer with NextUp, but we have other organizations that we engage with as well. So I don't think that there's a perfect work-life balance, but how do you prioritize life in order to make sure that you're maximizing various opportunities? So just kind of really thinking about creating psychological safety. I think we talked a little bit earlier about salary negotiation.
Yeah.
And then no doubt, I think all of us have a kind of a IDP, an individual development plan. You kind of know where your career is going. However, when you reach some of those challenging times in your career, how do you navigate some of those conversations in order to be able to be successful as well?
Yeah. No, I love that. It's funny because I can remember my wife when we first moved here, my wife homeschooled my boys. And so she had been out of her career for a while as she was raising children. And she just recently got back into being in career mode. She's a marketing background. And, one of the first things she said to me was, okay, now I can't do everything I used to do the way I used to do it. Food, running errands, picking everybody else. And so we have totally had to look at all of our responsibilities and be like, oh, okay, I'm having to pick up a lot of the slack that, would have normally rested on her as the primary caregiver of our kids. And especially, and so we had to have that conversation about what does that look like now that you're back in the workplace full time, and how do we navigate that so that you are as fulfilled in what you're doing and you're not stressed out because not only are you doing this, but you're having to think about all the stuff back at home that was never quite removed from your plate.
which I think that's amazing that you're supporting your wife. One, bonus points for you.
Thank you.
But I would even kind of touch on like the McKinsey Women in the Workplace study, and it talks about the pandemic and how it's impacted women as far as women advancement from a numbers perspective, right? Because you have a number of women who kind of made that shift in order to be able to take care of kids and take care of family during the pandemic. And now that they are re-entering the workforce, what does that look like from a support perspective? So we've seen numbers even shift around the number of women in the workforce and how we're advancing to the executive level as well, and the time that it'll take for us to make up as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I feel like we all lost some time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've all lost some time from that. So, but no, I appreciate you sharing that. So what else are you guys working on in the near future? I know you have a big event that you do every year what tied to, with the LPGA when they come to town. I know that's typically been in the late summer, early fall. And do you want to talk a little bit about that event and what that represents for NextUp?
Yeah, it is one of our signature events. It's probably the most important event that we do throughout the year. We do various types of events, smaller, larger, lunch and learns, pop-ups, different formats. But that Women's Empowerment Summit that we do in conjunction with the LPGA, it is really a mini conference. It's world-class speakers come in. We do a breakfast. We've got some great opportunities for our sponsors to activate at that event. And it's consistently one of our most highly rated, and it brings in the most membership interest throughout the year. Yeah. But, we had speakers on everything from stress and overwhelm management to different techniques for navigating those. Sometimes we call them pivot points.
Right.
Of your different life stages of your career. And it really is just a great opportunity. This past year, 2022, was incredibly special because it was the first really large in-person event that we had held since the pandemic. And so it was incredible to see people, just the power of people connecting in person, which I think we all know is very important.
It is.
We took it for granted and then it was taken away from us. And then we learned how to manage without it. But now that we've got it back, I think that for me personally was a big impression on that event of how important it is that we are really intentional about, we're living in this new world now where we have virtual events and we have in-person events.
Yeah.
But there's something magical about being in that big room. We had 700 people.
Wow.
At this year's event. So really big. It'll be happening again for 2023. It's going to happen in September.
Okay.
With the shifting date for the LPGA. And, we'll probably have to get a larger room this time.
It was a sold out event.
That's a good problem to have.
It was a sold out event. And I think it really resonated with our members to come out and support each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of celebration at this year's event.
Okay. Well, I can imagine some of my listeners are listening to this like, man, okay, I want to be a part of this. How does somebody go about becoming a part of NextUp? Is it just through affiliations at their employer, or is it just open to anyone to come at any time?
It's open.
Yeah.
It's definitely open.
The easiest way is to go to nextupisnow.org. And there's a drop down for regions. Just go to Northwest Arkansas and it's going to have all of our upcoming events. And so, like I said, there could be a virtual lunch and learn. There could be a mixer, happy hour. There could be, some kind of speaker learning event, just depending on when your listener happens to stumble upon this podcast.
Yeah.
I guarantee you we'll have something coming up in the near future.
Well, we'll make sure we attach a direct link to the NWA section of the nextup.org site.
Wonderful.
So that everybody can connect with that. If I was a female entrepreneur, running my own business, just maybe a solo practitioner or I've got a couple of employees, how are they finding getting involved with NextUp? Is there opportunities for them as well?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, in the spring, we hosted a panel of entrepreneurs for women-owned business.
Sure.
And so definitely an opportunity for entrepreneurs to join as well as their associates as well. It's truly an organization for everyone. I feel that we're very intentional in welcoming everybody and then making sure that when we think about our programming, that it is customized for all women, all levels, in order to have a seat at the table and have a voice.
Right. So, okay. And then my next question would simply be, as a male, which I am, how do I become an ally for NextUp? And to, obviously after this, I'm going to tell people about it. Every woman that I know that's in Northwest Arkansas, I'm like, are you a part of NextUp? If you're not, why not? You know what I'm saying? But I mean, how do men in this region, become allies for what you guys are doing?
I think you just show up.
Okay.
So the challenge is for the brave men who used to come out to the network of executive women. They were very brave. I think you have to be a little less brave now that we're NextUp. But you show up, and the truth is you are going to be, one of a few men at some of these events.
Yeah.
Some are more well attended by men and some are less well attended by men, but it is a different space.
Yeah.
And so first of all, just showing up and being willing to learn and listen and see the world through a different lens, I think is the way that you start. And you become a member like anyone else. Look, the networking is great, just like for anyone else. You're going to learn a lot from the content of the programming, just like anyone else. And the more that we have people like yourself who are already thinking about the ways that they are making their total family unit work better and therefore their businesses and their societies. I mean, that's what it's all about, is making, wins across the board.
Yeah.
We ask men to show up, engage with the women that are part of the organization, and then more importantly, to advocate for women. So when you come in, engage with us, network with us, when you go back to your respective workplaces, how do you show up and advocate for women? So to me, I always kind of have that call to action. Like, we definitely want you to come and engage with us, but then actually have a call to action and advocate on our behalf as well.
Yeah, I love that because, I've actually had the opportunity with some of my podcast strategy consulting work to work with some women on a national level that were trying to create a stronger voice in the design industry space. So engineers and architects, which is primarily a male dominated, area. And we created a podcast for them, the Elevate Her podcast. And we had an opportunity to do that. So I feel like I'm doing some of that, and I want to do more of it. And, Kimberly, you might appreciate this. I heard recently somebody say that it's cool to be an ally, but allies, it's better if you're part of the band.
Right.
And I want to be part of the band as far as that's concerned, right? When you think of people that are all, because everybody matters in a band, right? Collectively, because everybody plays a role in that band. And so certainly from this perspective of helping to advance women's issues and just creating awareness, I think it's important that a lot of people that obviously a lot of men need to step up and kind of help in this area, because there's tremendous opportunity to advance this cause and to create more awareness around this subject matter, and to create a safe space where women can continue to evolve and grow. I think it doesn't, it's...
Yeah. And I mean, and let's be real here too. We are about advancing women in business. Yeah. And so we're not, we volunteer our time for this nonprofit, but we don't work for nonprofits, right? And so we have a vested interest in business and making our businesses stronger. And we have data that shows that when women are involved in the leadership of a business, that business performs better. And
Absolutely.
So, it's bottom line too. Like, we're talking about a lot of things that are the right thing to do, but it's also the business. It's in the benefit of the business to do these things that are right.
Yeah. And that just speaks to the importance of diversity in business, period.
Diversity in business. And I would add that we have a number of sponsors where they have an opportunity through the many benefits that we offer through NextUp Northwest Arkansas to take care of their associates as well, associates and employees.
Yeah. So if I'm listening to this and I'm the owner of a company with, maybe 50, 60, 70 employees, I could sponsor all of the women to be a part of this organization if I wanted to.
Absolutely. You can sponsor an event, or if you want to actually, purchase memberships for your employees. There are a number of ways for you to tap into the organization and utilize the tools and resources as well.
Okay. That's great.
I would say, especially for that size of a company that does not have the resources to do, really intense and robust leadership training, DEI&B training, you could not beat the training that we have. I mean, for our companies that have that internally, that's a nice additional benefit. But for the company sizes that you're speaking of, it's a priceless resource that we have access to through this organization.
That's actually a great example that you just made. And so there are firms that maybe can't afford to hire a DEI person. And so this might be one way to, as they continue to grow, to make sure that they're not offering this type of opportunity to their employees. So, yeah, I think that's huge. So is there anything else that you guys would like to add? Again, the contact information for NextUp, it's nextupnow.org.
NextUpisNow.
At nextupisnow.org. Okay, perfect. And then we'll make sure that we tie to the Northwest Arkansas portion of that website. Any other events that you might like to mention that will be coming up in the near future, or one event that you think that people listening to this may want to try to avail themselves of in the future?
I think it's just looking at the calendar. Again, we try to have something for everyone, whether they would like to show up in person, whether they can squeeze in a virtual lunch hour. Just check our calendar. We do try to appeal to lots of different interests. And then, too, I would say if this is something that sounds appealing to you, come to an event, talk to someone. We've got ambassadors at every event. We really make an intentional effort to make everyone feel that they belong at all of our events, and ask how you can get involved. It's never too early to get involved. We usually have an open list of roles in the organization that we're trying to fill. And so, if you've gotten really excited about what we said, then get a little bit more involved.
Well, count me part of the band.
All right, get in the band.
When we're done with this podcast, I'm going to find out the date of the next event, and I'm going to show up and participate. So, and I'll tell some other people about it.
Yes,
so.
And I would just say that no doubt we shared, go out to the website and look at the calendar of events. I'll hit a couple of highlights that we have on a few topics.
Sure.
So we have a personal branding in a social world event that's coming up relatively soon. And then also just kind of teaching women how to thrive in the workplace. And then last but not least, we have a networking event that's coming up as well. So just a few of the highlights.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah. Well, we'll make sure all of that information is in our show notes. And regardless of what time of year you're actually listening to this episode, we'll make sure you have an ability to connect with both Kimberly and Lela to gain more insight and understanding as to everything that NextUp is doing, all the programs that they're offering, and ways that you can get involved. Because I'm telling you, you can't just listen to this information that we put out on a weekly basis and not get involved. And I'll
add one more. No doubt we shared our website, but for real-time updates, we have social pages. So go out to whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, NextUp, Northwest Arkansas, you will receive real-time updates and highlights about the organization.
Right. And we'll link to all that in the show notes, because I certainly want to encourage folks to do that. If anybody wanted to reach either of you directly, do you guys have a way to get connected with you guys?
Just LinkedIn.
Just LinkedIn. Okay. All right.
Perfect.
So yeah, we'll make sure we put your LinkedIn information on the show notes as well. And so if you're listening to this and you want to just connect with Lela or connect with Kimberly and thank them for the work that they're doing with NextUp, or just ask a question, please feel free to do that. And they're approachable, and that's why they're sitting in front of me right now. So I appreciate that.
Approachable and friendly.
And friendly, yes, absolutely.
We try.
Yes. And I certainly would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Hillary Coldiron for actually bringing this all together. Hillary was so excited about the program and about NextUp and you guys. And she was like, oh, you need to sit down with these guys and learn more about NextUp and what we're doing. And so, Hillary, this is for you. I appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to share my platform with your organization and what both Kimberly and Lela and the rest of the team at NextUp Northwest Arkansas are doing. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting us. And if we can just give a shout out to all of our leadership team with NextUp Northwest Arkansas, as well as our volunteers.
Yes, please do.
They work extremely hard on behalf of the organization. And so we just want to say thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I really appreciate you guys listening to this. Remember, to learn more about us and all things Northwest Arkansas, please visit our website, iamnorthwestarkansas.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter there. You can also subscribe to the podcast. We're on every major platform, including Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn. And remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. We will see you back here soon. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.